He thought it was just a fence, a simple wooden fence he had built years ago with his own hands. But one morning, a single letter from the HOA changed everything. You must remove your fence immediately. No warning, no explanation, just cold words that shook him to the core. Every nail, every plank he had worked on, threatened to be taken away. Could a fence really cause this much chaos? He couldn't believe it, yet there it was, staring him in the face, a demand that made him question everything he thought he knew about fairness and control. The fence had always been more than wood. It was his pride, his personal space, his sanctuary. Every weekend spent measuring, sawing, and painting felt like it had been stolen in an instant by bureaucratic authority. He stared at the envelope in his hand, heart racing, unsure whether to laugh at the absurdity or cry at the injustice. The HOA had no personal relationship with him, no context, just rules that seemed crafted to intimidate rather than protect. He stepped outside and looked at the fence. Sunlight reflected off the polished panels, almost mocking him. How could something so simple trigger such fury? Determined to understand, he called the HOA office. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. The fence allegedly violated a rule buried deep in an amendment he had never even heard of. Its height, color, and style apparently did not comply with the obscure guidelines. He asked questions, tried reasoning, but it was useless. The system was absolute. Remove it immediately or face daily fines and legal action, she said. Every word hit like a hammer, and he felt trapped between losing his hard work and being financially punished for standing his ground. He spent the next few hours pacing, looking at the fence from every angle. His mind raced with questions. Could he fight this? Was it worth risking escalating tension with the HOA? He remembered the weekends spent hammering nails, the evenings measuring twice to make sure everything was perfect, the satisfaction of seeing the fence stand tall against wind and rain. And now, a faceless organization was telling him that none of that mattered. The following days were a blur of research and frustration. He dug through old rules, old amendments, and legal clauses, and the deeper he went, the more he realized. The rules were intentionally confusing, giving them the power to control homeowners at whim. It was a fight against bureaucracy, against intimidation, and against a system designed to keep him feeling powerless. Each page he read, every line of legal jargon, fueled his anger and determination. Meanwhile, subtle tension began appearing in his neighborhood. Some neighbors avoided his eyes. Whispers floated through the streets about the difficult homeowner. It was as if the fence had become a symbol of rebellion, not just a wooden barrier around his yard. The daily notices and fines added pressure. He realized this wasn't just about wood and nails, it was about asserting dominance over someone who dared to claim their rights. Then came the first fine. $100, a small number, but significant enough to make him pause and reassess. He could pay, yes, but every payment would feel like surrender. The HOA seemed to know exactly how to chip away at his resolve. Their presence became a shadow over his home. Every knock at the door, every visit from a representative, reminded him that they were watching, waiting for him to falter. One day, a representative came in person, clipboard in hand, measuring, noting, evaluating. He watched the boy with detached scrutiny, not seeing him as a human being, but as a violation of their power. The encounter left him shaken, but also more resolute. He realized that compliance would mean giving up not only the fence, but a part of himself. The pride and hard work it represented. At night, he sat on his porch staring at the fence, now more than ever a symbol of defiance. He recalled the weekends of labor, the meticulous measurements, the satisfaction of the final coat of paint drying in the sun, and he knew he couldn't let it go without a fight. The fence was his, and he had invested not just money, but time, effort, and love into it. It wasn't just a barrier, it was proof of his independence and his right to make choices about his own property. Then a ray of hope arrived in the form of a neighbor. She had observed everything quietly and admitted she had been intimidated by the HOA herself. She encouraged him to continue documenting every step, offered advice on legal rights, and reminded him that he was not alone. That support, small as it was, renewed his resolve. He began photographing every part of the fence, noting dates, measuring dimensions, and preparing to defend himself if necessary. Days turned into weeks, and the battle of wills continued. Each notice, each visit, each implied threat of fines or legal action was met with careful documentation and unwavering determination. The fence had transformed from a simple boundary into a monument of resistance. He realized that standing up for his rights wasn't just about wood and nails, it was about integrity, perseverance, and not letting an overbearing system strip him of dignity. And so, as the sun set each evening, casting long shadows across the yard and the fence he loved, he knew one thing: he wasn't backing down. The HOA may have tried to intimidate him, but they couldn't touch his courage or the pride he had in his work. Whatever happened next, the story of this fence would be a lesson not just about rules and regulations, but about human resilience, personal pride, and the courage to defend what is rightfully yours. The next morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, knowing today might be the day the HOA tried to enforce their threat. The sun was just rising, casting golden light across the yard, and my fence, standing tall and proud, looked back at me as if it understood the fight we were in together. I had prepared everything meticulously: photos, measurements, receipts for the materials, and notes on every correspondence with the HOA. I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. By late morning, a black SUV pulled up at the end of the street. Two men stepped out in crisp uniforms, clipboards in hand. The HOA representative had returned, and this time he wasn't polite. His tone was stern, almost condescending. As he approached the fence, I stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, feeling a surge of anger mixed with determination. This was my home, my fence. My rights? He began measuring again, noting angles and checking posts with precision. I watched him carefully, knowing that any mistake on my part could be used against me. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered subtly, peeking from windows and doors, some curious, some cautious, afraid of the HOA's authority. I noticed a few faces that seemed sympathetic, though none dared speak up yet. The tension was palpable, thick in the air. Finally, he looked at me and said, "You have 10 days to remove this fence. After that, fines and legal action will begin." His words were flat, final, but I felt a spark inside me ignite. 10 days? That wasn't a threat, it was a countdown, and I would use every second to fight. I calmly replied, "I have documentation proving this fence is legal and within community standards. I will not remove it without review." His face tightened, the arrogance of authority slipping into frustration. That night I pored over every rule, every clause, every amendment the HOA had ever released. It was overwhelming, like navigating a maze designed to confuse and intimidate homeowners, but I was determined. I started drafting a formal letter, citing specific points where the fence did not actually violate the regulations. I included photographs from various angles, proof of purchase for every plank, and timestamps showing the construction timeline. This wasn't just paperwork, it was my shield, my weapon in this battle. The next day I printed everything, bound it neatly, and hand-delivered it to the HOA office. The receptionist raised her eyebrows, probably wondering why I was so persistent. I could feel my heart pounding, every step towards that office a mix of dread and defiance. Inside, the main office felt cold and impersonal, with fluorescent lights reflecting off sterile walls. I handed the packet to the receptionist, who passed it to a manager. I didn't say much, but my resolve was clear in my stance and gaze. Meanwhile, the story began spreading through the neighborhood. Word of my fight against the HOA circulated quietly. Some neighbors whispered their support. Others stayed silent, fearing reprisal. A few even came by to leave notes of encouragement on my porch. Their small gestures reminded me that this wasn't just my battle, it was a struggle many homeowners face silently, trapped under an overbearing system. Days passed, and the HOA responded with a meeting notice. I knew this would be the turning point. I prepared meticulously, rehearsing my points, organizing my documents, and mentally bracing for confrontation. When I walked into the meeting room, the air was heavy with tension. HOA board members sat behind the long table, their expressions neutral, masking any reaction. While I stood in front of them with my binder in hand, the discussion began calmly at first. They recited the rule, claiming my fence was out of compliance. I countered with my evidence, measurements, photos, material receipts, and even comparisons with other fences in the neighborhood that clearly did not violate any rules. I could see a few board members shifting uneasily, the weight of my preparation evident even through their practiced stoicism. Then came the objections. They pointed to a minor clause, hoping to intimidate me. I had anticipated this. I calmly referred to their own published amendments, showing how the clause didn't apply retroactively, and that my fence met the requirements for construction standards and design. I spoke slowly, confidently, ensuring every word was heard and understood. I wasn't arguing, I was presenting facts. A murmur ran through the room. Some neighbors attending had quietly gathered outside the glass windows, peeking in. They had been curious, but were now witnessing firsthand a homeowner standing up against a powerful organization. The atmosphere shifted. The once confident board members were now visibly uncomfortable, caught between enforcing rules and facing undeniable evidence. After what felt like hours, the board paused. They whispered among themselves, clearly debating how to respond. I remained standing, binder in hand, calm but ready for any tactic they might throw at me. Finally, the chairperson spoke. "We will review your documents and respond within 7 days." That was the first sign of hesitation, a crack in their authority. I nodded respectfully, knowing that the battle wasn't over yet. But this was progress. Outside the office, I exhaled deeply. The sun had begun to set, casting a golden glow across the neighborhood. The fence waited for me at home, standing as a symbol of resilience and determination. I knew that the next week would be critical, but I felt empowered. I had faced the authority head-on and proved that preparation, knowledge, and courage could challenge even the most overbearing systems. The following days, I continued documenting, staying vigilant against any further notices or threats. The HOA seemed quieter, less aggressive, as if they had realized I wasn't an easy target. Neighbors who had been hesitant began approaching me, asking questions, sharing their own experiences, and quietly expressing support. I realized this wasn't just about a fence, it was about standing up for personal rights, about refusing to be intimidated by bureaucracy, and about inspiring others to do the same. And then, finally, the response arrived. The HOA admitted that, after reviewing the documentation, my fence did comply with the regulations and no further action would be taken. It was a moment of vindication, a triumph not just for me, but for every homeowner who had felt powerless under the weight of arbitrary rules. The relief was overwhelming, a mixture of joy, exhaustion, and pride. The fence had survived, not because of luck, but because I refused to give up, because I had fought smart, calmly, and persistently. Looking back, the fence was never just a fence. It was a symbol of standing your ground, of asserting your rights, and of the importance of preparation and courage in the face of authority. I had learned that systems may try to intimidate you, but knowledge, documentation, and confidence are powerful tools. And I also realized that sometimes resistance isn't just about protecting property, it's about protecting your dignity. After receiving the HOA's official response, I felt a wave of relief, but it was accompanied by a strange mix of disbelief and reflection. Months of stress, fear, and constant tension had finally come to an end. My fence, the object that had sparked such chaos, was now officially safe. No fines, no removal, no legal threats. It stood tall in my yard, a monument not just to wood and nails, but to patience, determination, and persistence. Yet the story didn't end there. There were lessons to be learned, people to connect with, and a neighborhood to mend. In the days that followed, I noticed small changes. Neighbors who had previously avoided me now nodded with respect, some even sharing their own stories of frustration with the HOA. I realized that my fight had inspired others, showing that standing up for your rights, even against overwhelming bureaucracy, was not only possible but necessary. The fence had become more than just a physical barrier. It had become a symbol of courage, a visible sign that I refused to be intimidated. I decided to host a small gathering in my backyard, inviting a few neighbors who had been supportive throughout the ordeal. As we sat by the fence, sipping tea and sharing stories, I felt a sense of community I hadn't noticed before. People began to talk openly about HOA rules, about the unnecessary pressures, and about the importance of documentation and knowing your rights. The fence, once a point of contention, had now become a centerpiece for dialogue, understanding, and even humor. We laughed about the absurdity of some rules, but we also shared strategies for protecting ourselves in the future. The HOA, for its part, seemed to retreat slightly. Their initial aggressive stance had softened, perhaps because they realized I was prepared, informed, and willing to assert my rights. I continued to document everything, maintaining careful records, photographs, and notes of any correspondence. Even though the immediate threat was gone, I knew the importance of staying vigilant. Bureaucracies like this rarely disappear entirely. They wait for complacency. But now I felt empowered rather than intimidated. Looking back, I realized how much this experience had changed me. I had started as a homeowner simply wanting to enjoy my backyard in peace. By the end, I had become a student of regulations, an advocate for myself and an example for my neighbors. My perspective had shifted. What had initially seemed like a simple fence dispute had evolved into a profound lesson about standing up for what is right, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. The story didn't just end. With the victory over the HOA, I also reconnected with neighbors who had felt powerless themselves. By sharing my experience and encouraging open dialogue, we formed a small but supportive network of homeowners determined to protect their rights while maintaining harmony in the community. It was amazing to see how a single fence, an object so simple, had sparked conversations, built trust, and inspired collaboration. I also took time to reflect on the personal growth this ordeal had sparked. Patience, research, preparation, and persistence had been key tools. I had learned the importance of calm communication, of presenting facts rather than emotions, and of standing firm without escalating conflict unnecessarily. It was a lesson in resilience, courage, and strategic thinking. I realized that facing challenges head-on, even those that feel unfair or overwhelming, can transform fear into empowerment. As weeks passed, life slowly returned to normal. The fence continued to stand proudly in my yard, a reminder of the battle fought and won. I noticed children playing nearby, neighbors walking past with smiles, and a renewed sense of freedom in my personal space. The physical structure of the fence was unchanged, but its meaning had transformed entirely. It was no longer just a boundary, it was a testament to perseverance, knowledge, and the quiet power of standing up for oneself. Eventually, the stopped contacting me directly. Their letters ceased, their representatives no longer visited, and the daily tension that had once dominated my life disappeared. The threat of fines evaporated. What had seemed like a hopeless fight turned into a story of triumph. I had faced authority, documentation in hand, and emerged victorious. My fence had survived, but more importantly, my confidence and sense of justice had been reinforced. I shared the story online, recounting every detail of the ordeal. The response was overwhelming. Homeowners from other communities reached out, thanking me for demonstrating that one could fight back against unreasonable rules. Some shared similar experiences, while others sought guidance on how to protect themselves. I realized that my personal struggle had become a beacon for others, a story that resonated far beyond my backyard. Through it all, the fence remained, unchanged physically but transformed symbolically. It represented determination, courage, and respect for personal rights. And it reminded me that even the smallest objects like a simple wooden fence can become catalysts for significant change, for personal growth, and for community unity. Looking back, I'm proud not only of the fence, but of the person I became in the process. I faced bureaucracy, intimidation, and fear, and I emerged stronger. The experience taught me that standing up for what is right requires more than anger or frustration. It requires knowledge, planning, patience, and persistence. And sometimes, the smallest victories like keeping a fence can teach the biggest. Lessons about life, justice, and self-respect. Now, whenever I look at the fence, I see more than wood and nails. I see resilience, I see courage, I see the power of a single individual to challenge authority, protect their home, and inspire others. The HOA may have tried to break me, but in the end, the fence and I stood stronger than ever, and this story isn't just about me. It's about anyone who has faced unfair rules, unreasonable authorities, or situations that seem impossible to overcome. It's a reminder that preparation, persistence, and courage can change outcomes, even when the odds seem insurmountable. The fence, my quiet victory, will always remind me that standing up for yourself is never wasted effort. So, if you've ever felt powerless or overwhelmed by rules, remember this story. Take a stand, gather your evidence, speak your truth. And like me, you might just find that even the smallest fence can teach the biggest lesson. Subscribe to our channel to watch the full story and learn how one homeowner turned a fight over a fence into a lesson in courage, resilience, and triumph over bureaucracy.